The auditorium crackled with restless anticipation, the neat rows of my graduating class in their blue gowns, the parents braced in plastic seats, fanning themselves against the Rio summer heat. My heart thundered beneath my robe as I adjusted the edge of my notes. I had been chosen to deliver the graduation speech, a fact that felt both like a vindication, top of my class at Colegio Estadual Pedro II, and a threat, considering the things I wanted to say. I cleared my throat, finding my mother's stern face near the front. My uncle Eduardo sat beside her, arms folded like barricades, eyebrows steep. On the other side of the aisle, I caught Tomas, laughing always with his pack from the favela neighborhood where we both grew up. All eyes sharp and expectant pressed in on me. Boa tarde, I began, my voice stronger than I felt. Today isn't just about what we've achieved together. My hands trembled, so I steadied them against the lectern. I wanted to speak of possibility, of dreaming beyond the flaking concrete and the rusted wires of our quarter, past the pounding samba that filled the alleyways each dusk, to the horizon of what wasn't yet. The world where I, awkward, obsessed with things I could never quite explain to my cousins, would one day sculpt cures in the dark rooms of a biotech lab, changing the world they'd see. A sharp cough cut through my rising words. My throat tightened. From the far end of the stage, the principal shifted in his chair and frowned. People whispered. Uncle Eduardo stood abruptly, making the plastic creak. Bastante ja, he barked, not bothering to hide his irritation. Talk about a real job, Raphael, not your Hollywood nonsense. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple. Laughter fluttered through the audience as if a joke had been told. Tomas let out a particularly raucous hoot, slapping his thigh. Red heat flushed up my neck. I tried to continue, voice wavering. I want to work to discover. A second interruption. Discover what, Molk? Come back down, there's no money in these fantasies. A neighbor, Dona Teresa. Even the teachers were stifling grins now. A second later, the microphone was gently taken from me by the vice principal, all practiced smiles and apologies, as if I had brought shame to my family by daring to dream. I stared out, humiliated, the ink on my notes running with my sweat, eyes prickling, unable to process the roaring in my ears. They thought I was ridiculous, a poor kid from Complexo do Alemo, dreaming of being some kind of scientist. Afterward, my mother, face smoothed with false encouragement, patted my arm. You know they mean well, Philho, you're smart, but not all dreams happen for us. She pressed a wad of cash into my pocket. Pay the internet this month. Uncle Eduardo eyed me. Best get a job at the mechanics. Marilda's son was accepted last week. Outside, as I walked alone past the graffitied walls and sun-bleached rooftops, muffled laughter and jabs passed from group to group when they saw me. I caught snatches of their words. Professor Maluquinho, little crazy professor. I clenched my jaw, heat coiling in my gut, rage and embarrassment, mingling so closely I could barely separate them. I didn't answer. I just walked, the samba from the festa in the main square echoing behind me, my steps outpacing the urge to scream or to cry. The city sprawled before me, beautiful and merciless. I promised myself, teeth gritted, that I would leave this place, not in spite but because of it. When I finally reached home, a squat apartment, walls blooming with mildew, abuela's rosary looped over the doorknob, I lay awake long after everyone else, listening to the television's static next door, plotting out my escape. 2 years passed in a grind of menial jobs and late nights, my hours spent hunched over second-hand textbooks, pages water-stained and annotated by previous hopefuls. My mother's sighs grew heavier as more job notices went unanswered, and Uncle Eduardo made less of an effort to hide his smirking contempt. Still playing with your formulas, Raffinha, Tomas would jeer when we tangled in the streets. Even on the rare evenings when I tried to join the old dinners, laughter would flick to me with that mixture of derision and pity reserved for fools who dream too loudly. Still, I learned to survive on the scraps of my own belief. Rio was a city of survivors, people who strutted and starved year after year and called it resilience. I let rage sharpen me rather than crush me. I saved every centavo, hunting scholarships online at battered cafes, trading beer nights for nights spent elbow-deep in biochemical forums, or teaching myself Python on outdated library computers. One evening, after a 10-hour shift stacking boxes at the docks, I checked my battered email and saw it. Acceptance to a new biotech program at the Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. Tuition waived, living stipend included, but with a catch, a brutal entrance exam and 2 months to prepare. Nobody in my family had set foot on the campus as a student. When I broke the news at dinner, my mother only stared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Do you think you belong there?" she asked, trembling. "Those are the children of doctors. Lawyers." I nodded, afraid to show just how much I doubted myself. "Then I'll be the first who isn't," I said, voice low. "If I let them see me flinch, I'd never find the courage again." Uncle Eduardo sipped his beer. "Dreams are for rich boys," he muttered. I ignored him and returned to my books. The months leading to the exam blurred together: adrenaline, black coffee, pages filled with genetic codes, metabolic pathways, the mathematics of neural networks. My brain stretched to the point of snapping. I stopped coming to family meals, became an invisible ghost in my own home. My mother pretended not to resent it, leaving sandwiches on my desk as if feeding a sick animal. The morning of the exam, a riot of butterflies shredded my insides. I buttoned my best shirt, stepped out into a world stilled by sunrise and the screech of distant trains. The campus glowed gold and green, impossibly far from the crackle and clang of our favela. I let myself dream, only a little, just enough to think maybe. When the results came a month later, I had scored highest in the class. Nobody at home cheered. Instead, my mother's hands trembled as she read the thin letter, lips forming a silent, anxious prayer. Uncle Eduardo only commented that I'd soon change my mind when the money ran out. I pocketed the acceptance and left, too raw for words. University was a world apart, an alien constellation where I spoke with an accent, wore clothes 2 years behind style, carried my poverty like a badge. Group work was a constant battle. Boys with perfect teeth dismissed my questions, girls giggled behind their hands when I stumbled over English during presentations. "You're from Alema, right?" whispered one, eyebrow arching. "You know anyone who can get us cheap weed?" The world they inhabited, weekends at Copacabana, parents who sent them abroad, was galaxies from mine. But science made sense when people didn't. I lost myself in labs thick with the sour tang of ethanol, pipetting gene solutions with steady hands. Professors soon noticed. After a year, I was working late in the tissue culture room, helping postdocs run experiments, the click and hum of machines my music. My code, ugly but functional, started predicting protein folding with uncanny accuracy. I was given more latitude, then fellowships to conferences in Sao Paulo, then Boston. The more I achieved, the harder it became at home. My mother's silences grew longer. Eduardo's eyes narrowed each time I returned, now in slightly nicer clothes, carrying a battered laptop thick with my notes. At family barbecues, Tomas would nudge his friends and snicker when I tried to talk about CRISPR, switching to football as if I were a curiosity. "You think you're too good for us now?" he jeered, the old edge of envy and disbelief. No, but the word fell flat. Our worlds now only overlapped on calendars: Mother's Day, New Year's, funerals. I felt like an interloper at my own table. Still, I returned out of guilt, out of longing for anyone to see I was more than just the punchline. 4 years into my doctorate, my project caught the attention of an international biotech firm, an application of AI-driven prediction to design rapid diagnostics for Zika, badly needed in the favelas. At the international conference where I presented, people from Paris to Tokyo asked me for my code. Money finally trickled in. Grant letters with my name filled my inbox. Then a job offer, New York City, double what my whole family made in a year. The day I flew out, nobody came to the airport except my mother. She hugged me without words, silent tears marking the collar of my shirt. "Don't forget us," she whispered, her voice tight with everything she couldn't say. She pressed a scapula into my palm. I didn't let go until boarding. The years that followed blurred into airports, research labs, dinners with strangers, the rhythm of Manhattan thrumming beneath my window. My Portuguese faded, but my name appeared on journal covers. Money no longer ached in the background. I wired funds home each quarter dutifully, receipts received with silence. They never asked questions. I stopped trying to explain. For a while I let myself pretend I didn't care. Survival became a habit, achievement its own anesthetic. At moments, staring out over the East River or listening to English news anchor drone my name, I'd remember the laughter, the heat, the humiliation of that auditorium. I'd feel that old fire rage like a coal hidden beneath ashes. Then, out of nowhere, an invitation arrived, keynote speaker at a Rio Science conference. "A son of Complexo do Alemo," the blurb read, "changing the future of infectious disease diagnosis." They wanted me a local. It was the school that contacted me, the same principal, his words slightly more humble now. I booked my flight before I could talk myself out of it. Stepping off the plane, the city hit me like the memory of music. Thick, honeyed air, heavy as always, the Rio landscape spreading out in impossible green and cragged summits, Christ the Redeemer watching. On the ride from Gallo Airport, I stared at the mosaic of life flickering by. Kids with weathered footballs, mothers with toddlers on hips, battered buses snaking past stalls hawking feijoada and mangoes. Everything had changed, nothing had. The day of the keynote, I arrived at the same school auditorium, now air-conditioned and sleek. My nerves pricked with nerves, the old ghosts of rejection still camped out in my veins. Family and old neighbors had been invited by the municipal government, the invitation written in stilted, formal Portuguese. I hadn't warned them I'd said yes. The front row was full, my mother, older now, white streaks dusting her hair, holding her hands tight in her lap. Eduardo, unmoved, jaw tight under his neat mustache. Tomas, slightly softened, more paunch than brawn, but the same sly smile. Others from the neighborhood, Dona Teresa, now walking with a cane, a cousin or two craning for a glimpse. Behind the curtain, waiting to go on, I stared at my reflection in the dressing mirror. The suit felt like armor. I tried a smile and failed. My name was introduced. Applause, polite and tentative, met me. For a second I stood, heart pulsing in my throat. Then I began, voice level, poised, telling the arc of my journey, not in boast but in clear, direct terms. I showed my failures and my struggle, the long agony of small humiliations, my mother's silent worries, the years away marked only by science and homesickness. I explained the research, how AI, genetics and biology united had shaved months off diagnostic timelines, how the new portable kit, a palm-sized marvel that I held in my hand, would help doctors in the favelas save lives in hours, not weeks. I set the kit down on the podium. I looked to my mother, she blinked back, tears, lips pressed thin. Eduardo stared expressionless. Tomas only blinked hard, then came the proof. I pulled up the slide. Case studies, photos of local clinics now using our device, testimonies from health workers in Bonfim and Rossenher. A video played, my voice dubbed over footage of nurses using the device, swabbing children, the results blinking on screen. -4 Zika, real patients, real relief. You see this, I said finally, holding up the kit so all could see. We made it for you, for us, it works. People are alive who wouldn't have been. What was once a ridiculous dream is now reality, here at home, from here, from us. Silence thick as fog, then slowly applause, minimal at first. It built one hand, then two, then a shockwave, roar as thunder. My mother stood, face wet, clapping. Dona Teresa, struggling up from her seat, whispered, Meu Deus. Tomas' hands slapped together, almost in disbelief, as if gravity itself had shifted. Eduardo stayed in his seat, eyes dark. But when I stepped off stage, he faced me in the crowded aisle, voice hoarse. I was wrong, nephew. He shook my hand, squeezed until it hurt. You did it, you really did. The crowd pressed in, neighbors with tears, old teachers stammering apologies, strangers asking for autographs and photos. Mothers from the neighborhood stopped me, hands shaking. You changed our lives, Raphael, they said over and over. I couldn't answer. The rage I'd carried for years had burned away, replaced by an unfamiliar lightness. I was seen as a scientist, yes, but more, as one of them, bearing something real. Afterward in the schoolyard, my mother hugged me tight, her voice tremulous. You always were too stubborn. Your father would be proud. For the first time in years, I believed her. Later that night, over late coffee in our peeling kitchen, Eduardo spoke again, quietly. Maybe dreams are work, not luck. On my old bed, surrounded by shelves bowed with old textbooks, I listened to the city breathing, samba spilling from the street, voices below, dusk falling blue over the hills. I had come home not as a conqueror but as a son at long last welcomed. In the dark, for the first time, I slept without resentment. The future, once shaped by rage, now seemed full of room to hope.